For a third time now, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre says that he is not considering or proposing pulling Canada out of the Paris Climate Accords. The Standing Committee on Finance wants to remove charitable status from religious and anti-abortion groups. Several large Canadian banks opt out of a formal climate alliance with the UN. Canadian institutions normalize discrimination based on skin color and ethnicity. Our goal, as always, is to bring you news, culture, and politics from a distinctly Christian, conservative, and Canadian perspective. I'm Andrew DiBartolo. This is Liberty Dispatch Newsbrief. Bull Bitcoin has been Canada's most trusted exchange since 2013. They take it upon themselves to help empower individuals with the most potent form of money the world has ever known. Go to mission.bullbitcoin.com/dispatch today and get started with your account creation. Contact Bull's best in the business customer support team at any point throughout the process to request assistance. Mission.bullbitcoin.com/dispatch. Take control of your money today. Federal Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre continues to be rather coy regarding whether he plans on pulling Canada from the Paris Climate Accords if he's elected Prime Minister. We need a bit of history to set this up. In November 2023, as the world was preparing for another COP28 climate summit, Poilievre was asked on his way to a caucus meeting if he would withdraw Canada from the Paris Agreement. He responded, quote, "We're not proposing that," close quote. In April 2024, Poilievre was again asked if he would withdraw Canada from the Paris Climate Agreement. That time, he chose not to answer the question at all. Just this past Wednesday, Poilievre was asked again if he would pull Canada out of the Paris Climate Agreement after President Trump pulled the United States out of both the Paris Agreement and the WHO. Poilievre responded, quote, "We are not proposing that," close quote. It appears that Axe the Tax Pierre will keep Canada involved in the eco-Marxist Paris Climate Agreement and the globalist WHO. I'm not surprised, considering I've seen pictures of Poilievre sporting the UN's Rainbow Circle 2030 Sustainable Goals Development lapel pin. Back in December, few Canadians noticed the pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2025 budget, which is the report of the Standing Committee on Finance. It's obviously full of a lot of fluffy bureaucracy speak designed to give lots of people state jobs that waste our tax dollars. However, we did notice the following troubling portions. The report had two particular recommendations that should alarm Christians and Christian organizations in Canada. Quote, recommendation number 429, no longer provide charitable status to anti-abortion organizations. Recommendation number 430, amend the Income Tax Act to provide a definition of a charity that would remove the privileged status of advancement of religion as a charitable purpose, close quote. In other words, the Standing Committee on Finance in Canada believes that any charity that does not support abortions should lose their charitable status, and that charities that exist for the advancement of religion should also lose their charitable status. If a registered charity has their charitable status revoked for any reason, that triggers the automatic dissolution of the organization, and 100% of everything they have and own is given to either the CRA or a charity of the CRA's choosing. And if you recall, in October of last year, the federal government announced that moving forward, pregnancy care centers would have to explicitly state whether or not they offered infanticide services or referred women to places where they can have their babies murdered. It seems all of the pieces are falling into place to severely punish all those who do not bow to the state and support the murder of preborn babies in Canada. In a rather surprising development, several Canadian banks have decided to back out of the UN's 2050 Climate Alliance. This is from LifeSite News. Quote, last Friday, Toronto Dominion Bank, Bank of Montreal, National Bank of Canada, and the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce said they were all withdrawing from the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which calls for banks to come in line with the push for net zero emissions by 2050. The NZBA is a subgroup of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, which was founded and backed by the United Nations. The sudden decision from Canadian banks to ditch the alliance comes despite Trudeau's government still being committed to so-called net zero policies, and only a few days before pro-oil and gas U.S. President Donald Trump was sworn into office. Close quote. Obviously, even though these banks have backed out of the alliance, they still engaged in a massive virtue signaling campaign by saying how committed they are to the environment and fighting climate change and blah, blah, blah. It appears that banks, woke as they may be, are still most concerned with making money. Speaking of money, are you looking to take control of your investments and align them with your Christian values? At Rocklink Investment Partners, they build customized portfolios tailored to your specific needs, all while promoting transparency and integrity. As a privately managed investment firm operated by Christians with a conservative worldview, Rocklink stands apart by helping you grow your wealth without compromising your beliefs. Visit rocklink.com or email them at info@rocklink.com and discover how they can help you steward your finances wisely. Rocklink Investment Partners, integrity-driven, values-aligned, and built for you. For a final story, True North News did a good job highlighting 6 times that ethnic-based discrimination was normalized by Canadian institutions. Let's go over them, shall we? Number 1, hiring faculty and accepting students based on their ethnicity and the color of their skin. Quote, in January, the University of British Columbia and the University of Victoria mandated that new professor hires be black. For UBC, it wasn't enough just to be a black scholar. New hires also had to prove that they'd committed to the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and decolonization. Toronto Metropolitan University's new medical school was intent on barring non-equity deserving groups from 3/4 of the available student positions at the school. Its 2025 intake program stated that 75% of the 94 available seats that the program offered would be taken from the school's Indigenous, Black, or other equity-deserving admissions pathways. Close quote. Number 2, library hiring discrimination. Quote, the chief librarian at Burnaby Public Library in British Columbia, Beth Davis, boasted that the library rejected resumes from white candidates and interviewed only non-white candidates, close quote. Number 3, not tree planting for white people. Quote, Ottawa's climate change and forestry officials called on Ottawa City Council to do race-based tree equity analysis to ensure the trees were planted in neighborhoods with a high number of racial minorities. The Tree Equity Score, a proposed method for determining what neighborhoods deserve new trees planted, took into account the race, age, language, employment, health, and income of residents in an area. The method was to determine which neighborhoods were of higher and lower priority for the tree planting program, close quote. Number 4, stopping arrests and releasing inmates based on skin color. Quote, the Liberal government's Black Justice strategy presents a roadmap which advocates for a 50% reduction in the amount of Black and Indigenous people incarcerated in Canada by 2034. The plan is an attempt to reduce the problem of overrepresentation of Black and Indigenous people in prisons. To do this, it recommends not only the release of Black and Indigenous people in custody, but also reducing the number of Canadians from these communities being imprisoned to begin with, close quote. Number 5, the Environmental Racism Bill. Quote, the environmental racism law, championed by Green Party leader Elizabeth May, received royal assent in June. It classifies environmental hazards being built near Indigenous or marginalized communities as environmental racism. The law, previously Bill C-226, prescribes a bureaucracy to analyze the racial demographics around polluting industries, reparations to be paid for any racialized community affected by pollution, and effectively limits new polluting industrial buildings only to be developed in predominantly white areas, close quote. Number 6, cheaper dance tickets for non-white people. Quote, a family-friendly dance in Montreal was planning to charge different admission prices to attendees based on their skin color. The Shake La Cabane Fam Jam was scheduled at the La Cabane Community Center in December. Organizers charge $25.83 for white people, but only $15 for black, indigenous, or people of color. Close quote. Well, there you have it. You are all up to date with your news for the week. Until next time, Galatians 5:1.